It is my huge pleasure to be here today to talk to Sir Paul McCartney about this absolutely wonderful book, The Lyrics, which is just published. A quite exquisite book, 2 volumes. I think everybody who opens it will find very surprising and thrilling. And that, I hope we can now explore as to just quite why. Sir Paul, thank you for
Thank you. Thanks for doing this. Yeah,
an absolute honour, and I have to say, as a bookseller, a special privilege, given what you've produced. Could you just tell us, because it is surprising, I think, why you chose to create this book in this manner?
My brother-in-law and the New York publisher Bob Weil of Norton got together over lunch, and they started thinking about this and sort of saying, well, you know, it'd be good if we could do something with Paul. And it includes sort of art and some poems and lots of lyrics and discussing, have the commentaries. And I ended up anyway having a lunch with them where they put this idea to me, and I said, yeah, sounds great. But it grew, because I've got a great team at my office in London here who keep my archive, which I thought had all gone. I thought I'd just lost it over the years. Easy come, easy go. But it turned out it was in little storage units and cupboards and rooms and things, and they found it all. So when the American publisher was dealing with my archive kids here, it just became a thrilling project. They said, oh, we've got this. And my guys were sort of saying, would you like this? What about these original lyrics? What about this and stuff? So it just grew. And I was really a bit of a bystander until they said to me, we want you to talk about these songs in conversation with Paul Muldoon, who at that point I didn't know personally. I knew of him. And so we got together, and you know, he's Irish, I'm of Irish extraction, so we already had something going. And he's a poet, and I'm sort of songwriter, so we were in the same area, you know. And really what happened, we just ended up having 5 years of great conversations, which we taped. So someone's had the horrible job of transcribing them all. And that, with the lyrics, and the handwritten lyrics, and with drawings and photographs, suddenly made this very interesting book.
And it is precisely that. It's that you've given us this selection of your lyrics. So it's not all the lyrics, it's a selection of the particularly illuminating ones, with these transcribed conversations, and then inspirations, places, loves, this cornucopia of influences on your life, but then given to us A to Z, not chronologically. What was the thinking behind that?
I think it was, if you wanted to know about a particular song, you didn't want to have to go to the index and find what page it was on. Kind of made it a lot easier. You want to know about Eleanor Rigby, that'll be under E. So, you know, it was really just for ease of access. And
reading it, where there is this, actually I found, because I started at A and ended at Z or Z, that I was building a picture all the time, and actually a new picture. There are wonderful biographies and that have told your life, but this is doing it in a very personal way. And I found that it was building episodically. Did that surprise you, or was there any purpose to the way that you were choosing?
Well, no, the idea of having it alphabetical was, at first I thought, well, is that going to work? Because maybe you want the early songs first and then you want to build, but it works. You just skip around. But it's like in a film, where you can just have this scene and you skip into the future, then skip back. Ah, I see that. That's what that means. And it's quite an interesting way to do it. No, I was just interested talking about the songs, and then interested in reading that, as you say, we start with All My Loving, and then it sort of moves into another period. It doesn't just stay in that period. But it's all about me, it's all about the songs, it's all about my recollections. And as you say, the nice thing that happens is, if I'm talking, for instance, about Eleanor Rigby, the song, I know where I got this idea of sort of lonely old ladies, so I can go into that explanation. And it's funny, I was just in Liverpool just up at the weekend, and we drove by the place where this first lonely old lady lived. And I used to just go and see her, say, do you need anything? You know, I was a Boy Scout, so I'm doing my good deed. And I got to like her a lot, and the conversation was thrilling because, you know, she'd talk to me about crystal radio sets, and I'd say, what's that? She said, well, here it is. And she got in. And just the depth of her experience was fascinating for me, because she'd lived through the war and had this whole other range of subjects that I'd not been exposed to. So I was now learning from her. And even though she was a lonely old lady, I liked those people. I met a few more. And so Eleanor Rigby is a kind of composite of those people.
And Liverpool does infuse the book and obviously your life, and this amazing sort of early influences, obviously first and foremost your mother and father, extraordinary, and then through this incredible quality of education that you had, and then the people that you met.
Yes.
Perhaps first your parents, who were such wonderful companions in this book, your mother, your father, coming through and informing your songwriting, not just in those early songs, but really it seems throughout.
Yeah, I think so. You know, my dad was the musician who would play at the family parties. So he was the music in the house. We had a piano, like a lot of people in that era. And so I would listen to all his music, and it would just go in me. So I would, oh, I love that chord. I love the way that chord goes into that chord. What is it? And just through my life, I would discover, oh, that's that change, you know. And he had a friend called Freddie Rimmer, who would come around, who he worked with at the Cotton Exchange. They were both cotton salesmen. Freddie had come round to visit, and I really thought Freddie was amazing. And so did my dad. Freddie himself said, no, nothing special. But he seemed to have a richer vein of chords. So yeah, it was all going on. And then my mum was a nurse and later a midwife, and she was very aspirational, like a lot of mums. She wanted her kids to do well, hopefully to become doctors, her being a nurse. But they were aspiring because the people they were working with, my mum working with doctors, she would see it's a different level. You know, these are very educated people. My dad had the similar thing with the people who owned his company. It was the cotton brokers, where they took the cotton in from everywhere around the world and sold it onto the mills behind Liverpool. And he had the people there who were, obviously as their owners, they're posher than people that we'd normally meet. So he was exposed to that. So he learned things like, I think crosswords, I think came from that, gardening, all sorts of good influences that then they'd bring into our house. So, you know, I was getting an education via their bosses, kind of thing. And then I went to a really good school, Liverpool Institute High School for Boys, which was 1,000 boys. Quite an experience, you know, walking in the first day, my little short trousers and my satchel, and as an 11-year-old, and just being in this huge institution. It had been a public school. As an 11-year-old, I was in the third form. So I could never work out, why aren't I in the first form? Well, because there'd been, 9-year-olds used to go to this school. So they just kept the whole system. And it was very good. For someone who wasn't able to pay, like my parents, it was a really good, looking back on it, it was a really good free education where, you know, the first year I was learning Latin and Spanish and all the other subjects. Second year it was Latin, Spanish and German. So, you know, just in 2 years I'm engaged in...
And it's broadening perspectives, and you're finding books, you're reading...
And then I'm finding books because I had a really good teacher, Alan Durbin, who'd been taught by F.R. Leavis, who again had a great teacher. So it was a lineage that I just happened upon. I didn't know how special it was till much later. But he turned me on to books because, you know, in the English literature class, I was kind of interested, but the truth of it is he told me the dirty bits in the Canterbury Tales. So by now I was like 15. So for a 15-year-old Liverpool boy, this was interesting. Because, you know, I didn't know Chaucer was so bawdy. And seeing it, it was like, wow. And it is funny because I now tell my kids' friends and various other people who I know they're doing literature and they're going to do Chaucer, and I know they go, oh my God. I said, just read Miller's Tale, you know. And I start telling them and they get a bit, oh my God, this old guy is getting dirty on us. I said, no, it's not me, it is Chaucer. But I just loved the idea that way back in history, there was this sort of naughty sense of humor that I could totally, I mean, my mates could totally identify with. So yeah, I became hooked on books and would go to the local bookshops, and I bought a lot of plays that weren't on the syllabus. So it was just good, you know, just have a little
beginning
book in
to
your pocket.
memorize and get the sense of poetry and song construction, your lyric construction.
Yeah, unwittingly, because, you know, I didn't really know I was going to do much with my songwriting. That was just a little hobby. But yes, I do think that is true, that the meter of some of these things, I mean, one of the things I learned was that Shakespeare often uses rhyming couplets. And I always thought that was a kind of interesting idea. If you're going to end a scene, I can't remember one now, but out, but give him a shout. Goodbye. And then they walk off. I thought, oh, that's good. It works. So I unconsciously, I ended up ending one of my songs. And in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. Not realizing that that's where I picked it up, the idea from. So yeah, it was really sort of a great period for me in Liverpool, getting that education, which, I mean, I didn't really go on to use that education other than in what I did.
And there does seem to have been that freedom that you weren't required to excel academically and university and the rest. You were allowed, actually, as soon as you began to broaden your interests. Yeah. That was encouraged.
I think that's very true, because I think it might have dampened it if I'd now had to really know Chaucer and, you know, really be able to write knowledgeably about what it was I was enjoying. I didn't have to do that. I now got into the freedom of songwriting, and once I met John, and he was the only other person in the universe I'd ever met, when I said, oh yeah, I write some songs, he said, so do I. So suddenly we had a friendship and a bond. But yeah, no, if we'd have had to get academic on it, I think it could have killed it. Whereas it was just, oh, Lewis Carroll. Turned out he loved Jabberwocky, and I love Jabberwocky. So these things, you know, crept into songs like I'm the Walrus, and From the Walrus and the Carpenter. You know, you just were stealing from all these little ideas and making them our own in our own songs. So it came in a very free and natural way.
And throughout this, the scrapbook element to it, we have a continuing influence of other creative forces. There are painters who appear, musicians obviously, many playwrights, the whole lot. So the other creative arts, how have they inspired you?
A lot. It goes back to, I was always interested in art and in modern art. And in Liverpool, they had a prize, an essay prize, when the coronation was happening in 1953. I now can look at it and I realise it's a PR exercise. Because, you know, from this perspective, you know, then it was just, wow, you know, if you're going for an essay prize and if you win, you'll get free books and things, you know. Anyway, I won a minor prize, but was allowed to go and get a book. So I got a book on modern art. And so that kind of started my interest in that. And then the great thing about the 60s was this whole scene was together in London, basically. So you would go to a club like the Establishment and you would meet Peter Cook, you would meet John Mortimer, you would meet painters and sculptors. And so you could have these great conversations which widen your horizons all the time. You go around to see Peter Blake or go around to see Richard Hamilton, and just hanging with them, it gave you a new perspective, which then we were able to put into our work. So, you know, when we needed an album cover, in the old days, you just went and you got your photo taken. But then we started to think, wait a minute. EMI, it was our record label, they did start to get a bit worried because we were now spending £75 on a record cover. And they were scandalised. Doesn't seem so much now, but you know, they'd paid a £5 for a quick photograph. Well, it was such a rich scene in London in the 60s that it all entered your life, your work, your conversations.
And one can clearly see it through this book as one marches through all of these sort of creative influences upon you. And then, of course, you started with this great collaboration with John Lennon. And many of us, I'm sure, know the full stories and the ins and outs, but it feels in this book that it has a particularly human element as it runs throughout. Do you feel that this now, with the great sort of passage of time, being able to represent it in this very sympathetic way, is actually appropriate?
I think it is a good thing. I mean, there were periods, you know, like at the breakup of the Beatles where we weren't so friendly, so you couldn't do anything like this then because the sort of hurt feelings and stuff like that would have crept in. Now that so much time's elapsed, now that John isn't here and George isn't here, you get a whole new perspective. So if I'm ever talking to anyone, it's with great affection because they're my fallen heroes, you know. And so I'm more like a fan these days when I'm talking about the Beatles stuff. Then I was making it alongside the guys, so you were just so busy working and doing your thing. Now I can look back on it all and just think, wow, that was amazing. If I'd write a song called It's Getting Better All the Time, then John was likely to chirp in with, it couldn't get much worse. And, you know, now I realize, wow, that's very valuable in the creative process, to have someone who just doesn't go, that's nice, and just adds and adds. So we had that ping-ponging kind of technique. I'd write a line, he'd write a second line, or he'd write a line. So it was really good. We were very helpful for one another. And I think now I can look back on it in a loving way and think, that was very special.
That's certainly what comes through sort of repeatedly, and then also the other sort of huge sort of relationship with Linda, as you describe it, your muse, who again comes through both Linda and to a sense Kintyre as a place as well, which infuses the book. And
that was our escape. At the time that I'd met Linda and we were sort of falling for one another, the Beatles breakup and the business things were happening, And it was really very unpleasant to be in London where we were living. So Linda said to me one day, "You've got a farm up in Scotland, haven't you?" I said, "Yeah, I don't go there much." She said, "Can we go?" So we went, and through her eyes, which is an American visiting Scotland, very romantic view of it all, I caught the bug, and I saw it like that, which was great, because before that I wasn't as enamored of it as she was. So we not only had a great time up there, very free. We were now free of everything. You know, if my business end needed me, they would sort of ring me. I said, "Well, I can't come in, I'm sorry." It was just perfect. So all these heavy business meetings, I was able to avoid a lot of them. And so we built our life together.
And a family.
And a family. So we were raising our family. And the thing, looking back on it, that was great for me is I'd always wanted to be a man. You know, not just a sort of kid who played the guitar. And when you're married, now you have responsibility. You've got a wife, you've got kids. So I wanted to be that guy. So I had to be. I'm in Scotland. So if we want a table, I've got to make it. So that was great. I mean, it just brought things out of me that I never thought.
You don't want the drip to come through. You're up on the roof.
Roof needs painting. I'm your man. So it was great. It was lots of things like that. We had the freedom to just be yourself. We managed to avoid most of the business trouble. So it was a good period.
And talking of mending the roof and fixing a hole, you've got this very striking line in the book, which is, "Before I write a song, there's a black hole, and then I get my guitar or piano and fill it in." The creative process starts with a hole.
Yeah, it's yeah. Or you can also, like pulling a rabbit out of a hat, it's still a hole, the top hat. Yeah, if you think, "Oh, I'll write a song," which, you know, if I've got some time and I'm just sitting around and I'm fed up with watching telly, I think, "Oh, I could do." So I get my guitar, and I'm very conscious of the fact there's nothing there. I haven't got any idea what I'm going to do. It's a black hole. But then I start picking away and get a little bit of an idea. You go, "Oh, that's nice." And you follow that trail. And at the end of maybe 2 or 3 hours, you've suddenly got this thing. You've got this song. So now, instead of a black hole, you can now go and play this thing to people. You now present this little discovery. Look what I just done. And it's a great thing to be able to do. It's kind of magical.
It is completely magical. And these conversations with Paul Muldoon, it comes across time and again that you are both prepared to confront the very ordinary, Linda's cooking, how the kitchen is before you, but also very philosophical things. You will take inspiration from Tagore, the great Bengali poet. So you're tackling all eclectically.
Mm. It's just you're drawing on what you are and who you are. So all these influences from school and then beyond, poets I'd read, poets I'd meet, it's in you. So you can't help it. If you remember a particularly beautiful line from a poem, then you might take the feeling of that line and just massage it a bit. Now it's your line, but you've taken it from someone who's great, someone who you admire a lot. And you know, I would meet people like I ran into Allen Ginsberg, for instance. He was coming through London, and so we palled up, and yeah, it was great to be with him and to hang with him, because, you know, I've got such respect for him. And yet he was just another 60s character like I was.
There's plenty of those in this book.
And there's a lot of them, yeah. Well, I say I was lucky. It was a very rich period. So you could, I mean, one thing I would do would be to just ring people up hello, I'm Paul McCartney. You're Ivor Cutler, and I really like what you do. Should we go out for dinner? Anyone who fascinated me, I just said, do you want to meet up? Now, Alan he took some of my poems and he started to annotate them, started to correct them, like he was a poetry professor. And so I thought, well, that's okay, that's good, let's see what he comes up with. But what he did was and I said this to him in the end, I said, Alan, you're just making me into a beat poet. You're making me American, and that's not going to work. He was just taking out all the. So it was just Jill, Maine, Liverpool, Ivan. He snapped it all down, which I thought, that's okay, but it's not my voice. But just being exposed to him was, valuable. And so I can look back on that now and think, wow, that was really something special, I ended up backing him on guitar at the Albert Hall. He did a thing called Ballad of the Skeletons, and I ended up, well, what happened is he said to me, do you know anyone who could accompany me? And so I said, well, maybe Dave Stewart, maybe David Gilmour, maybe da. And I realised in the end what he meant was, would you do it?
You've got a guitar or two, haven't you?
Well, I can do it. Yeah.
And then your projects have obviously expanded greatly, and I was sort of intrigued particularly by the Liverpool Oratorio, where you were taking on really a completely different sort of thing, and it features sort of episodically in the book. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I knew Carl Davis, the composer and conductor, and his wife Jean, and Linda knew Jean. So he turned up one day and he said, the Liverpool Philharmonic is having a big anniversary. I think it was 150 years. And he said, and they'd like to commission you to write something. So I said, well, great, I had no idea what I was doing, but that's me. I'm like a great enthusiast, so I will accept things before I even know what I've accepted. So I used to just go to Carl's place and have some ideas of what I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted it to be in Liverpool, particularly the orchestra's Liverpool, I'm Liverpool. So what happened was we're sitting at the piano with Carl and I sat beside him, and he strikes a C major chord, very hopeful, and I said, what? He said, well, Paul McCartney, C major. Just like, let it be. I said, no, I'm thinking of do-dee-do-dee-do-dee-do-dee-do-dee. He goes, well, no, hold it. And then he scribbles it down. And then he was able to play it back for me, do-dee-do-dee-do. And I go, great. So this became our process. And we made this whole thing up, Liverpool Oratorio, and performed it at the cathedral in Liverpool, which is huge. I think it's the biggest cathedral in Europe. This is a very daunting place.
Yeah, no, and amongst, as you go through this book, you're constantly turning a page and just getting these sort of images, because it's so, there are photographs, but there's paintings of this, but when you turn and you see that cathedral full of the choir and the orchestra.
And of course the other thing for me was that I'd auditioned as a choir boy in that big place. So talk about intimidating as a 11, 12-year-old. And I went in because the idea was you'd get loads of free books if you passed and you went in the choir. But I failed. It was great because it wasn't my kind of thing. It was the guy auditioned, just me in a room with this guy, and he would just play a phrase on the piano and say, now sing that, just to see how whether I could retain do dee do 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 do. I go do 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 do, and I one or two notes wrong, so I never heard back. But then going back with the Liverpool Oratorio was kind of, yes,
that's showing
here
up.
I come.
That's showing up.
You turned me down, but I'm back.
And you've written for others, not which feature here. I mean, not hugely, but there's Badfinger, there's Mary Hopkins, as well as having, reference to Joe Cocker covering. How do you feel when your music is in other people's hands?
I love it. I do love it. Some people aren't that keen, because they don't like it being messed with. But I love it. I feel very flattered that somebody else likes my song enough to have a go at it. Joe Cocker did Little Help from My Friends, which turned the song into a sort of rock classic, you know, and it was done by people like John Belushi, and so I love that, and I like it, and I Love Her, one of my early ones, was covered by a soul singer called Esther Phillips, and she did And I Love Him. So, you know, I'm very flattered, I'm honoured that all that distance away, she's heard it and she wants to do it, and what's to complain about?
And I think one of the great things again about this book is that we've got now that your thoughts sort of beautifully distilled on each of these books. Do artists come to you all the time to seek sort of insight and as to what inspired these lyrics, what sits behind this song to inform their own engagement with it?
Not really. No, I mean, the nearest I get to that is my old school is now a performing arts school called LIPA, Liverpool Institute for the Performing Arts. And I go up there and talk to the songwriting students. So that's the nearest I get about trying to impart any wisdom. But I must admit, when I walk in the room, it's always one-on-one with one of the students. I walk in the room, I say, let me tell you first, I don't know how to do this. You'd think I'd know, but each song's different. You know, it arrives out of this black hole and I've no idea how it happened. But play me your song and I'll talk to you about it. And if I think anything could be improved, then I'll tell you. But generally, it's just encouraging people. But writers, professional writers, other than that, wouldn't really sort of come to me for advice. I don't know why.
Well, you were really the first. There was Buddy Holly as well, but you were the first to write and perform your own songs.
Yeah.
And that seemed sort of a hugely sort of innovative and exciting thing.
Yeah.
Do you now see the arc? Because most things in life follow arcs.
Yes. No, exactly, yeah. We didn't know people didn't write their own things. And so we'd get a record and we would discover the people who did. Little Richard always had credit on his things. Buddy Holly was pretty much on everything that he performed. And so when we saw him, we liked that he'd written it, that he was singing it, and that he was playing guitar. Because a lot of other people just stood there without an instrument. So it became very much something for us to emulate. And the other thing was, John loved the fact that he wore glasses, because John wore glasses, but always took them off if he thought there were girls around, or you know, if he wanted to look good. So when Buddy Holly came with glasses, John put them on proudly. But yeah, Buddy was a big influence, and other people. Chuck Berry, again, a composer who played the instrument. So that became our group. We became composers who played instruments. The Everly Brothers, same thing. They played guitars. So that's what attracted us. And we loved Elvis, but we would go and see Elvis's films and he would pick up a guitar and we would not be looking at him, we'd be looking at his fingers to see, is he playing that? And he did. I remember a D shape he had, and we thought, that's okay.
But the other thing about this book, which is 2 big volumes, so there's a lot in it. It's 154 songs, but it's just the sheer amount of hard work, because although you're going through A to Z, you keep on seeing just the years are going by through these songs. You are really working.
Yeah, I say to people when they say you work hard, I say, well, you don't work music, we play it. And even though it might sound a bit glib, it is true. To me, it would be a hobby if I didn't do it professionally. It's just something I love. It's because you're creating this thing out of a black hole, and it's very satisfying. So I love to do that. So I just keep on and on. I mean, I've always got a song on the go. I've got a few on the go at the moment, you know, just because I like the whole puzzle of, let's try and make this song work. Is it interesting enough? Does it say it in a good enough way? Maybe I should change that line. But it's an ongoing, interesting thing for me. And then when you feel you've got it right, it's okay, that'll do. And it's very satisfying. So I can't see myself ever stopping. So yeah, there's a lot of work or a lot of play.
Penguin, the great publisher of this book alongside Norton in the US, has invited some authors to ask and send in questions.
Okay.
So can I read you some of those? And I'll do it just in the order that I have them. Carlo Rovelli, the physicist and author of The Order of Time, amongst other works. Hi, Paul. I heard The Fool on the Hill when I was 15. The song has been the inspiration for my life. Your own life is the opposite of the life of the fool. Nobody could say, but nobody ever hears him or the sound he appears to make, about Paul McCartney. You've been heard like few others. So here is my question. When you four guys did what you did, you were heard by many as the singers of a changing world. You even sang, "We all want to change the world." Are you happy with the way the world has become?
Loaded question. In some ways I am. You know, there have been lots of advances. I happen to be a vegetarian of sort of 40 years, so I'm very thrilled to see that that is catching on and that it's tying in with climate change and the environment. That's a great thing. To see that wars and atrocities continue isn't such a great thing. You know, I suppose we'd always hope that as we get more and more civilized and as we learn more, that kind of thing would lessen. It doesn't seem to. I think you're always going to have warring factions. So, yeah, in one way, it's great, and it is changing. You know, we got the climate change conference, and that's good. We're not doing it fast enough. And then the minute someone like Greta Thunberg comes out and says it, we make fun of her because she's just some daft little schoolgirl. But she's actually the one making the most sense. So yeah, I think there's some great things happen, and there's great things happening, but there's always that sort of bad side.
And will the talented kid in Liverpool today find the element and find that space to have the opportunities and become this creative force that you have been?
Yeah, I think so. You know, you can look at it and you can say, well, it's not as easy because the field is very much more crowded than it was for us. But there was no reason why we should have become famous. You know, we're just kids from Liverpool. Everyone said, you'll never get famous from Liverpool. But just with one thing and another, we got better and became famous. So I'm sure those kind of opportunities are still open for kids. It wouldn't be the same. It now will involve devices and YouTube and all that, which we didn't have. But I think people still come through. I mean, you see someone like Ed Sheeran, that's happened to him, and from nothing, wasn't anything but his own talent. So yeah, I think stuff can still happen.
Johnny Pitts, the author of Afropean, there was a rumour that the Beatles would sit around and say stuff like, "I'm going to write myself a new swimming pool," thinking of what you could buy with the money a hit record would make. Could you speak about the pros and cons of writing for love versus writing for career, where and if the two meet? Brackets, thinking here of Stephen Pressfield's notion of turning pro when accepting money for work sometimes fuels good work.
It was only later that we discovered that what we were doing was art. and there were things like muses. And when we first got out of Liverpool, it was money. We were kids without jobs. Suddenly here was a job. And so we wanted to get paid, and the more money, the better, you know. And it's true, me and John did used to laugh. It was kind of a joke, half joke. And once we started to get a hit and knew what kind of money a hit could bring in, we said, well, let's write a swimming pool. Or you need a new extension, let's write it, come on, sit down. And so, yeah, it came out of that, you know, what we did. And then I think you then start to think, oh, you know, is it more noble if we don't write for money, if we just write for art or love? But that comes in anyway. It's not like it's excluded because you're accepting money. I mean, what we wanted was a guitar, a car, and a house. That was it. That was the height of our ambitions. So, you know, then you suddenly could get them. So yeah, so I've never been one to think that there's something dirty about accepting money. I think most people in the world do it, so there's got to be something okay about it. And love and marriage and friendship, most people in the world do that too. So I think the two can coexist. And yeah, I'm happy to enjoy both. And
to have stood for causes at times, which perhaps occasional record executives might have thought you should not.
No, it's true. You don't just use money for yourself. There can be someone who's desperate need of an operation, who you work with or you're very friendly with, and you can say, look, get up to Harley Street, get that operation. I don't want you waiting around. It might take months, and it might be. So that is I think, one of the great things about money, being able to change someone's life with something like that, and be able to donate to great causes. So you can see things changing. You can see how you can help people. So there's plenty of good stuff about money. You know, you don't have to just take it all. You can distribute it.
A quick one here from William Sieghart, the founder of the Forward Prize and editor of the Poetry Pharmacy. Are you ever inspired by other poets?
Yes, I am, yes. In fact, if I'm writing a song and I get a bit stuck, I will open a poetry book and just look for some nice words that flow, and then I'll massage it and make it my own thing. But in the early days, yeah, Dylan Thomas was somebody we were, you know, very keen on. We said Charles Dickens. A lot of that was great. Shakespeare sort of entered into what I was doing in ways I didn't realize. But yeah, I like poetry, so I will, you know, buy a slim volume and keep it in my pocket, and just there's something. It's more than romantic. It's something. There's something kind of noble about it. There's something like that these people would do that, would write poems. That's their motivation. So I like to see what they came up with, and it's often very inspiring. Yeah, so I read quite a lot of poetry.
Richard Osman, the presenter and now huge best-selling author with the Thursday Murder Club. You are the greatest songwriter of all time, and I refuse to listen to anyone who says otherwise. But what's the greatest pop song ever written by somebody else, and what makes it so great?
There are a lot. There are a lot. I think Paul Simon's written some amazing songs. I wouldn't want to just say one of them, but he's certainly written some great stuff. Bob Dylan, again, has written some great stuff. I'm really pleased that Richard, because I'm a big fan of this guy. He's
As a bookseller, I assure you I am too.
I bet you are, yeah. I think there's a lot of great songs been written that weren't by me or us. And those two people I mentioned, Paul Simon, particularly Dylan. I think Neil Young has come up with some classics. Beach Boys, God Only Knows. I think that's a great classic. And in a way I could say I wish I'd written them, but I've written enough. I've got enough to go on with, but yeah, there's some great writers and artists out there and I love to feel that when I'm writing something here, they're writing something there, and you get a little bit of rivalry going. We had a big rivalry with the Beach Boys. I suppose I had a little one with Paul Simon. It's good. I had one with John, rivalry with John. If he'd write a good one, I go, oh God, I better write something better. So that's good. It's a little bit of competition's a good thing. But yeah, no, I would think there are lots of classic songs that you need to give me 3 hours and I'd write you a very long list.
We can have you on Desert Island Discs. I mean, maybe you've already done that. James Rebanks, shepherd and best-selling author of English Pastoral. Have writers, other than songwriters, influenced your lyrics? If yes, then which writers and how did they influence your own work? To which I would say my own answer to him was, buy this book and read it and you will get a lot of the answers to that. But
yeah, having this teacher in the Liverpool Institute turned me on to literature, which I never pursued in the kind of academic way, but I did in a more sort of freewheeling way. But having access to all these things and being able to dip into little things just like James Thurber, they colour what you think. So I used to read quite a few plays on the bus. I'd have a little play going, Salome or Camino Real was one of my favourites. And I used to fancy myself as a bit of an artist, because once you get involved in it, you want to become it. You want it in your life even more than just reading the book. There were certain things, like Camino Real was one, that I thought, I want to direct this. I want to direct a version of this. And Alfred Jarry, Ubu Koku, there's one, Ubu is his famous one. But I had a great production on the BBC as I was going up to Liverpool in the car. So I love that. And that, again, that was something I wanted to direct. I'm not sure I do now, because I realise now it's a hard job and it would be very much in public. I wouldn't just be some little regional director having to go. But yeah, I think it all adds to what you do, and what you love. It all just becomes part of you if you're lucky.
Michael Lewis, who's the New York Times bestselling author of The Premonition, The Big Short, Moneyball, and others. Have you ever written a song about one thing, only to have it taken by listeners to be about something else? And if so, have you ever then thought, that's sort of right?
It's not so much the song, it's lyrics within the song that people have misheard. And I like that phenomenon of mishearing. So in my case, I wrote a song called Hi, 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 which got banned by the BBC, but in it was, I say, lie on the bed and get ready for my polygon. Because I'm kind of channeling Jarry and sort of, he uses the word polyhedra. Oh my polyhedra. It's just nonsense. Anyway, so I've got lie on the bed and get ready for my polygon. And people thought it was body gun. Lie on the bed and get ready for my body gun, which I thought is much better. You know, yeah, you know, people mistake things, and I like that. Elvis Costello's Manager, I'd always heard, it's the opening, I think, of Strawberry Fields, living is easy with eyes closed. And he always heard it as living is easy with nice clothes. And, you know, guys, almost better kind of thing, you know. And I remember the story that Allen Ginsberg told me about going to William Burroughs' house, and he saw a book there, or a manuscript or something, and it was called Naked Lust, but he read it, he was a bit short-sighted, he read it as Naked Lunch, and he told Burroughs that. So I like that when things just go a little bit askew and they're better.
Last one on this page is Paris Lee's, author of What It Feels Like for a Girl. What is the song or book or anything you wish you'd written?
There's quite a few. You know, I've got to the stage where I don't really wish I'd written it, because they wrote it and I'm very happy. And I remember thinking there was a Billy Joel song, said Stay the Way You Are, something like that. That's a nice song, I like that. There's a Sting song, Field of Gold, that I liked. And maybe Tambourine Man by Bob Dylan, I would have liked.
It's not a bad one.
That. There's a lot of them out there, you know, and I think at first you go, oh, I wish I'd written that. But then you realise, I've written enough.
Now, they didn't trust me to be able to read, so we have some of these that are on a...
Oh, iPad. Let's see.
Hello, I'm Daniel Handler, often known as Lemony Snicket. A long time ago, I was driving with my young son, and we were listening to We Are the Robots by Kraftwerk. And he said, are they really robots? And I said, no. And he said, are they pretending to be robots? And I said, yes. And he said, are the Beatles really Beatles? And I said, no. And he said, are they pretending to be Beatles? And I said, no. And he said, are they pretending to be Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band? And I said, I don't know anything. And so my question is, were you pretending to be Beatles? Were you pretending to be Wings? Were you pretending to be Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band? Are your songs you, or are you pretending to be something? Or is there no difference and we're all lost and alone?
Thank you, Daniel. We weren't pretending to be Beatles. That was just, we thought that was just a great group name that lots of girls particularly thought was creepy. I wasn't pretending to be Wings. It was a group name. But we were pretending to be Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, because that was the whole idea of that record. So Daniel, that's the one we were pretending to be. And you can tell your son that. Yeah, the whole idea for that record was that we were going to have alter egos, and we were, because we thought if we make another record under the Beatles, when I walk up to a microphone, it's Paul walking up to a microphone, or John walks up, it's John singing the song. So we thought it was kind of quite nice if it's not Paul, if it's this guy out of another group. It kind of, we freed ourselves and made a very free record because of that. But that was the one that we were pretending to be.
We have the great Mary Beard.
Oh, that Mary.
Hello, I'm Mary Beard. I'd like to ask what difference it makes putting these songs together as poems in a book. Do you read them differently? Is it more than a collection? I'd
Are you done, Mary?
also love to ask if you'd come on my BBC television.
Oh, now, Mary, you're
programme,
pushing your luck.
Culture.
I'm going to
Talk
pause
about
you.
this.
I'm sorry.
It's great fun.
You paused. It's all over, Mary. What was the question? What was the first bit? Anyone remember it? You have to go out.
Do they, when you have them in the book, do they come across differently?
That's right, when you read them, do they? Yeah, there is a bit of that. I did a poetry book with Norton, and with the help of a great friend of mine, Adrian Mitchell. And when I saw, they wanted some lyrics in there. So I put in, for instance, the lyrics to Blackbird. And when I saw it written out, not just as a song sheet, it did seem to have a bit more significance than me just singing it. And so that's really good, because then when I sang it after that, I sang it with more significance to me. And I'd said to Adrian, I said, if I do a reading, which I was due to do, I said, how do you do it? What do? You just read the poem, stand there. He said, well, if you can remember any little stories about writing it or about the poem, it's good to say that and then read the poem. So I thought about Blackbird, and I discovered things that I'd forgotten, that it was in the era of civil rights, and that I watching the Little Rock episode where the kids were being booed and shouted at, and as the black kids as they were going into the school. And so this idea of Blackbird became Black Girl in my mind. So yeah, so then you do read it differently, and then when I perform it in concert, I tell that story, and I will say, you know, in the civil rights, a lot of people in my audience don't necessarily know where it came from. So then I'll say, yeah, well, it's to do with that. And so it makes it a little bit more significant for them, particularly if we're playing in Alabama. We did play in Arkansas. We played in Little Rock. And the two ladies who you see in the black and white footage, you know, very courageously going through that crowd to get their education, they showed up at the concert. So it was a real full circle moment. I was able to talk to them and explain how my song had come about from seeing them in that footage. So yeah, I think once it gets written down, and as it has in this book, you do look at them differently. They do have maybe a little bit more significance than you thought.
Wonderful. We have Annette Gordon-Reed.
Sir Paul, do you set aside a time to write each day, or do you wait for inspiration? And has that changed over time?
Okay, good. So, no, I don't set aside a time to write. It's nearly always when I've got a free moment. So I might be at home and I've done the things in the morning that I want to do, and now I've got the afternoon and I've not got particularly any plans. So, and I've always got a guitar around, and there's always a piano in the house. So then that's my favorite moment, when I just sort of think, I've got time. I could, wait a minute, yeah, nobody's coming for 3 hours. So I could just get myself off into a corner and write a song about something. So that's when it happens. And I find that if I do sit down, I do that occasionally, but very rarely, it probably feels a little bit official. And I like it to feel just free, like it just appeared by magic. I will do it sometimes. And I have done it, but I don't think the songs were as good as the ones that just came out of the air when I had some free time. I think that seems to work better for me.
So there's a few in the book where you seem to have been sort of working and trying to find them, and then they become formed.
Yeah, I think what happens there is you'll write the song quite quickly, and then you go over it and you think, that's not really good, maybe I could do that better. So you'll think of a better idea, and then you've got to play it, because writing and singing lyrics is a completely different thing. You can write something on the page that looks like a great, insightful phrase. Now you sing it and it jumbles, so we can't use that. So it's a process. But yeah, sometimes you are, you know, scribbling out things, and yeah, you're hopefully just trying to work it till you get it right, till it just sounds like my song, and I can sing it, and it sings easily. I know Bob Dylan's very aware of that, because again, Allen Ginsberg, because he was questioning something of Bob's, and Bob said, it's a song. It's not a poem. It's quite a different thing, you know, you're going to sing it and perform it. So you don't have the same rules.
Have you missed performing in this curious and strange time that we are living
The
through?
only time I've performed since COVID was at my daughter Stella's 50th birthday party. And she said to me, Dad, will you get up? And she said, there's going to be a band there. I said, I don't know, maybe. I said, Stella, I want to have a party. It's a birthday party. I don't want to feel like I'm the entertainment. So I said, well, maybe I'll just get up and just do one quick song, like a drunk at a wedding. And I said, well, so that was my plan. But then what happened was they had a band, and now I'm the drunk at the wedding, so I'm having a drink, and I'm enjoying myself. And I suddenly think, oh my God, I've got to do something. So I go and watch the other people, and they were good people. There's Chrissy Hind did something, and now I noticed Chrissy's doing like 3 songs, and I'm getting up as the old drunken uncle. Then Noel Gallagher gets up, and he does 3 or 4 songs, and he does his big hit. So I'm going, oh my God. And I'm in the audience ready to be pulled up. So I get pulled up, and then one of the guys in the band, who I thank forever, said, do you fancy doing Birthday? Which I hadn't thought of. I thought, good call. So now I had that song and the one I was going to do. So now I had 2 songs. And yeah, I did it, and I really loved it. They were a good band, and I'm up there performing to the audience, but also mainly to my daughter, who's there right in front of me, and I'm going, you know, they say it's your birthday. So that worked great as a performance. And then afterwards I thought, wow, I really enjoyed that. And then so the next day I thought, yes, because you'd had a couple of drinks. So that's not going to necessarily translate to when I go on tour. But it was good. It did feel good. I feel like I nailed it.
And you've nailed this book.
Nailed it. There it is.
And I hope you feel enormously satisfied and proud with it.
I really do, actually. It's one of those things that from a little meeting, little lunch, I saw it develop, and my people who run my archive started to come out with suggestions, and then the Norton publishers started to come out with their suggestions. Penguin started to come out with theirs. So we had an amazing team that made it more than I thought it was ever going to be, and turned it into something I must say I didn't imagine. But just with all, and found stuff that I didn't know we had.
It is full of treasures, and
yeah.
I think as a bookseller and having now talked about this book and shared it with booksellers, I cannot tell you how pleased we are and how delighted we're going to be to have a lovely autumn selling it. It's going to be tremendous fun.
Wow. And thanks for doing this and taking me through the few more questions.
It's been wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.